Before we begin, it is important to understand that acceptance by a first choice journal, though it's ideal, it's not always possible. And the journey to publication involves leveraging every opportunity that comes your way, even when facing rejection. It is crucial that you view initial rejections as constructive steps. Often you are closer to publication than you realize. And even if your first submission falls short, this webinar will inform you about the publication process, helping you to navigate the journey confidently and effectively. So in this webinar, we will share some valuable tips and strategies across various stages of publication journey. And this will effectively help you to shorten your path to publication. I will start with the pre-submission stage, followed by Elian, who will discuss and about the post-submission stage, focusing on peer review and how to value feedback. Then Elena will talk about the post-rejection stage and the next steps after rejection. So now, moving on to the first part. In this part, I will discuss how to be realistic about choosing a journal and provide some insights from my own experience as an editor and a reviewer so that you can have better chances of acceptance in your chosen journal. Choosing the right journal for your submission is extremely crucial. And this is important because it increases the chance of acceptance on your first attempt, also ensures that your work reaches the appropriate and correct audience. So when choosing a journal, there are three important factors that you need to consider. The first is the scope, second is impact, and the third is speed. Let us dive into each of these factors in a bit more detail in the next slide. To understand the three factors that I introduced earlier, there are three questions that you need to ask yourself before you submit to a journal. So the first question that you need to ask is, what type of journal is appropriate for your paper? And this involves an understanding of journal expectations and whether it matches with your manuscript. And also you can ask yourself, like, if you should be informed about the different categories of journals available to you. Next, you need to ask yourself if you're aiming too high. It is always very tempting to submit to a high impact journal. However, these journals are very selective and often have high rejection rates. So it is a better strategy to aim for well-respected journals within your field. And the third question that you can ask yourself is, do you want to publish faster? If you have a time-sensitive research, it might be helpful to look into journals with faster publishing speeds and faster turnaround times. We will discuss each of these topics in details in the next slides. But first, let us look into what is exactly meant by journal expectations. To understand the journal expectations, let us look at it from the reviewer's mindset and viewpoint. Let us explore some of the questions asked by reviewers when they receive the manuscript for peer review. The first and foremost question that the reviewer might ask is whether the research questions, the motivations, the objectives have been clearly stated in the introduction and in the manuscript, and if a coherent case has been made why the research questions was even important to explore in the first place. Next, the reviewer might ask or look into whether the recent findings and literature has been properly cited and compared to in the manuscript, as this will allow the reviewer to judge the novelty of the work. The reviewer might also look into the appropriateness of the methodologies used in the research, and could any other methods be used to explain the results and observations better? One of the most important things that the reviewer might look into is whether the authors have speculated beyond the data, and this generally occurs when the conclusions are not supported by the results provided. So in such case, this might lead to a negative feedback from the reviewer. Another important consideration by the reviewer is whether the results conflict with the published literature and conclusions of other researchers in the field, and if that's the case, whether the authors have provided enough explanations and discussions to support their claims and conclusions. Next, let us also understand the journal expectations from an editor's mindset and viewpoint. Now, before sending it out for peer review, an editor can look into manuscript and verify whether it fits the standard and the current scope of the journal. Additionally, even though your study might be interesting, but it might be probably an editor might find it too preliminary to get published in the journal. And in such cases, it might get rejected even before sending it out for peer review. While after receiving the reviewer's comment, the editor might first look into the nature of the revisions required. If the revisions required are not that extensive, that the editor might then the editor might provide a minor and major revision. However, if the revisions are so extensive that they effectively constitute a new manuscript, that is, it involves that it would require a significant rewriting and repeating or adding of new analysis and data. In that scenario, the editor might provide a reject decision. Finally, the editor can consider if the main conclusions have been questioned by the reviewer. And as discussed in our previous slide, if the authors have speculated beyond the data, this might result in negative outcome and a rejection. So it is always important to prepare your manuscript while keeping in mind the editor and reviewer's mindset, and this will increase the chances of acceptance in your chosen journal. Now, with respect to the scope factor outlined in the introduction, let us understand the different journal types or categories available. There are two specific journal types available: the subject-specific journals and broad scope journals. The subject-specific journals, they cater to a specific field and also have a specialized audience. They have a concentrated scope and specific criteria, and only accept articles those fit their strict criteria. For example, some journals might require specific methodologies to be carried out to be suitable for the journal. They can have high prestige and significant impact within a specific field. Additionally, these journals often publish special issues on emerging topics. So this might help the authors to get familiarized with the latest advancement in the field, as well as know about the leading researchers in the field. Next, there are the broad scope journals. These journals cater to a wide range of readers across various disciplines. These journals also can be interdisciplinary in nature. So these journals, these interdisciplinary journals can help and encourage interdisciplinary collaborations. These journals have a more general scope and review criteria, and they often focus more on significance and potential impact of research. So this leads to a higher potential of visibility as well as a broader impact because it is being read by a large number of audience. The broad scope journals can also consider diverse topics and research methodologies, and this reduces the time and effort needed to modify the manuscript. So the submission process in these journals can be easier, especially in journals that are interdisciplinary in nature. Because of the broad scope, it is easier to align your manuscript to the journal's scope. So overall, it should be noted that some manuscripts might be more suitable for broad scope journals, while other might be more suitable for subject-specific journals. So understanding different journal types can help you to choose the appropriate one for your work. Finally, to assess the journal fit, several tools are available for your benefit. There are resources such as Science Direct and Journal Finder that can help you to find the appropriate Elsevier journal for your manuscript based on keywords and abstract. You can also check the journal aims and scope to ensure alignment with your research. Also, you can look into the recent issues published in the journal, as that will give you an idea of the expected standard of the journal. So earlier, we discussed three important factors to consider when choosing a journal. Now let us dive a little bit deeper into the second and the third factors, that is the impact and the speed. When evaluating the impact of the journal, it is crucial to look beyond the impact factor, and you should leverage all the journal metrics available at your disposal. There are databases such as Scopus, which is one of the largest database of peer-reviewed articles. And as shown here, it indexes a huge number of titles from various publishers across various disciplines. And this can allow you to find a correct journal for your work. Along with the impact factor, Scopus also shows other metrics such as site score, which can be a better representation of the journal's reach and influence. So this can be considered when choosing the appropriate journal for your research. Additionally, as discussed earlier, some journals might hold a more prestige or higher prestige in a specific field than others. So you can always put more weightage on the field specific reputation than other metrics. Talking to your colleagues and mentors and searching where the influential and the good and the top novel papers in your field are being published can also provide valuable insights into finding the appropriate journal. Finally, the speed at which the journal processes and publishes paper can be a critical factor, particularly in studies such as related to emerging technologies, public health, or urgent policy issues. So if you have a time-sensitive research, then you can look into publishing timelines, which are usually provided on the journal homepages, and then decide if this journal is right for you. So in the end, understanding the full publication process helps you set goals and also embrace feedback. Let us look at this flow chart to understand the editorial process in some more detail. Uh, so the publication process essentially consists of three parts. The first part is the manuscript submission stage, where you submit the manuscript to your chosen journal, followed by the editorial review, but the editor looks at the various aspects of the manuscript, starting with whether there are any ethical issues, such as plagiarism or any fundamental flaws. And if it does have any, then it will be rejected here. Additionally, the editor also considers whether the manuscript is in scope or if it fits the standard of the journal. If it does not fit any of the criteria, it can get rejected here. Otherwise, it is sent for peer review. After receiving the reviewer's comments, the editor again checks if there are any ethical issues or fundamental flaws pointed out by the reviewers. Also, if the reviewers have pointed out that it does not fit the standard of the journal, then it can be rejected here. And otherwise, it can go through several rounds of revisions and ultimately might get accepted. An important thing to be noted here is if your manuscript has been rejected either in the initial stage or after receiving the reviewer's comments for ethical issues such as plagiarism or simultaneous submissions or any other fundamental flaws, then the manuscript journey ends at the part 3, at this stage 3. However, if it has been rejected for other reasons, then it can be transferred to other journals. And this will be discussed later in this webinar. So it is very crucial and critical to understand that revisions and rejections are common. One should always accept these as the part of the journey and view any feedback as opportunities to improve. In the next part of the webinar, how to value feedback will be covered in detail. Overall, having information about the publication process together with the mindset that I discussed here reduces stress, keeps you motivated, and helps you achieve publication faster, even if you do not succeed on your first attempt. Now, I would like to invite Eliane to take the floor. She will be discussing peer review and how to value feedback. Over to you, Eliane.
Thank you, Rohan. I'm really excited to be here with you all today to share some of our insights on the post-submission stage of your publication journey, and specifically talk a bit about how peer review feedback can benefit you as authors. Before we dive into how peer review comments can help you get published, I just want to take a step back and revisit why the peer review process exists in the first place. The process is really meant to maintain scientific and publication standards, evaluate the importance of new scientific findings, and assess the originality of the research. And it's designed to help researchers improve and validate and really protect their work, and also make sure that your research can stand up to scrutiny. And it turns out actually that peer review, that the process itself has been around for quite some time. It started informally back in the 1600s, when some of the first scientific journals were founded, and then really became more formalized in the 1800s, along with the growth of universities and academic societies. So that process of peer review has been playing a big role for a few centuries now in making sure that only the highest quality papers get published. And expert reviewers will flag any concerns they see with the manuscript. They'll flag things like issues with the methodology, if conclusions don't follow from the results, and they'll also point out any potential ethical issues. So this process of peer review is widely supported within the scientific community, as was shown by this 2019 study, which found that 85% of researchers agree that without peer review, there wouldn't be any real quality control in science communication. Having said that, and also having been authors ourselves, we understand that the peer review process can sometimes feel like a bit of a mystery. And it really wasn't until I started working in publishing that I started to appreciate just how much time and how many people, both internal editorial teams and outside researchers, are involved in managing all the complexities of the peer review process. Because there's a lot to handle. There's maintaining confidentiality, and that's for both the manuscript and the identities of the reviewers, and also ensuring rigorous feedback and ethical standards. So now you might wonder, as I did as an author, what do editors actually look for when deciding if all your hard work will make it to that next stage of getting peer reviewed? As Rohan mentioned earlier, editors look at a variety of factors when deciding what to do with your paper. And typically, when your paper first comes across their desk, they'll ask two questions. First, is the topic within the realm of what the journal publishes? And does it bring something new and distinct from other recently published works? And if the editor feels the manuscript checks these boxes, they'll take a closer look at things like how thoroughly the author covers the topic, the quality of the writing, and whether the logic flows well. They'll also keep an eye out for any signs of plagiarism. So at this stage, if your paper isn't quite reaching the criteria of the journal, your manuscript may be rejected. However, as publishers are always looking for new ways to innovate, more and more editors are trying a different approach by sending papers out for peer review first before making an assessment. And so in this approach, they perform the bare necessity checks on scientific integrity, making sure there's no fundamental flaws, but they might delay their judgment on the novelty and match for that journal. And it's also good to keep in mind that editors may not always specialize in the exact topic of your paper, so that getting that feedback from peer reviewers with different expertise really can be valuable in helping editors make more informed decisions. And sometimes the analyses suggested by a reviewer can actually boost the relevance of your paper for that specific journal, so your target journal. And if you're willing to make those changes, you're more likely to get accepted at that journal. For example, we've seen cases where reviewers may initially be quite critical and even suggest the rejection of a paper. But then after they've seen that the authors have made the requested changes and added either extra experiments or done additional analyses, they ended up recommending the paper for publication in that specific journal after all. So whether the editor chooses this approach of inviting peer reviewers earlier in their assessment or not, getting that peer review feedback can ultimately lead to better outcomes, because taking those comments on board can help you meet the editorial criteria of the targeted journal. So another benefit is that getting a diverse set of opinions from a group of experts will typically make your research not only stronger, but more rigorous and also more impactful. And that means it's also more likely to get cited. And again, the scientific community is in agreement here that peer review helps improve the quality of research articles, as shown by the same 2019 survey by Elsevier and Sense about science. And another big plus for authors is that the feedback can really guide how you approach your future work. So it's a bit like having a roadmap for your next research project, which could be quite useful. So with these benefits, hopefully we can start to see peer review comments and the revisions as stepping stones in your publication journey, rather than hurdles to have to overcome. And that by incorporating the valuable feedback from experts, you can actually make the publication process a bit smoother. So of course, we all hope our manuscript is accepted after peer review. And as researchers ourselves, we've all been through the process of submitting a paper and getting that rejection. So we fully get that it can be really frustrating to receive that letter, especially after peer review. But in that moment of frustration, it's also good to remember that the reviewers are really just trying to help us as authors, and that their feedback is meant to be constructive and give us tips to improve and revise our manuscript. And so ultimately, this increases your chances of getting published. And so even if your paper is rejected, that expert feedback is never wasted. And revisions that you might make based on these comments are actually pretty critical to the next steps. So the silver lining here is that if your work has been reviewed by multiple experts, their feedback can help you improve it for submission to another journal, and it might just be a better fit there. And if you get a transfer offer to another journal, you might really want to consider it, because the good news there is when you transfer your paper, the reviews and your revisions generally also carry over. So this means not only fewer editors and reviewers have to assess that same manuscript, so overall it saves time, and more editors actually benefit from the same insightful peer review comments to make more informed decisions about your paper's future. And as an additional benefit, your work will have more exposure across the scientific community in this earlier stage, since your paper is making it across more editors' desks. So to wrap up on my section, no matter how or where you submit your manuscript next, editors really consider the reviewer's expertise and feedback. And then this leads not only to an improved and revised article, but it can also speed up your path to publication. And whether that's in your target journal or an alternate journal through a transfer offer that you might receive. And so now it's time for me to introduce my colleague, Elena, who will give you more insight into what to do after the manuscript is rejected and how to handle those transfer offers. Over to you, Elena. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Ellen, for introducing the topic of manuscript rejection. So I would like to discuss with you the various options available if your manuscript gets rejected from an editor's perspective. Additionally, I'm excited to share some first-hand experiences from published authors who have benefited from the article transfer service. Indeed, while it may come as a disappointment, a manuscript rejection is actually a common occurrence, and your first choice of journal may not always be the perfect fit. Remember, it's not personal. Take the rejection as an opportunity to understand the feedback and improve your paper for future submissions. So there are several options that you can consider after a manuscript rejection. For example, you can appeal the decision. However, this is not statistically very successful, as editorial decisions are often final and unlikely to change after an appeal. Submitting to preprint servers, such as the Elsevier preprint service SSRN, is another viable option. A preprint server is an online platform where researchers can share early versions of their research papers before they have been peer-reviewed and formally published in a scientific journal. And it is often a way to take some time and improve the manuscript. Another possibility is revising and resubmitting your manuscript to the same journal. But keep in mind that this is not always possible and your paper might face desk rejection, which means without peer review, if resubmitted. Alternatively, the two most common options are submitting your manuscript to another journal of your choice or taking advantage of the Elsevier article transfer service. And in the next slide, we will see in more details the features of each approach. So you might be hesitant about which option to choose. So let's take a closer look at these last two. On the left-hand side, you see the advantages of submitting your paper to a journal of your choice. You have the freedom to choose any journal, even if this implies taking the time to research about new journals. This, of course, includes checking, for example, if the scope of the journal is properly aligning with the topic of your manuscript, as my colleague Rohan mentioned before. Of course, this is an approach that is always possible, and it is easier if you have a direct alternative in mind. Moreover, you are starting your submission process from scratch, and so you are free to reorganize your paper and implement also fundamental changes in it. Alternatively, transferring your paper to a recommended journal ensures a smooth transfer process with guidance at every step through the decision. Of course, you also have the opportunity to revise your paper before finalizing the submission at the recommended journal, and you receive tailored editorial suggestions from in-house or academic editors or recommendations driven by matching technology and in-house data. This overall potentially increases your chances of acceptance and reduces the time to publication. There will be more details about the acceptance and speed rates in the next slides. So you might want to know more about how these offers are created. So in this slide, you can see that rejected manuscripts may receive an article transfer offer that is issued by one of these three different entities. First, journal editors, who reject the paper themselves and then recommend an alternative journal for the paper. Then we have scientific editors, who are in-house subject matter experts who use their knowledge, experience, and also past data to recommend the most suitable journal for a specific manuscript. And last but not least, matching technology. So specific algorithms that take into consideration many different kinds of data, such as topics, citation, acceptance rates, keywords, and so on, to identify the best journal for your manuscript.